Yo, picture this shit. You choking your chicken hard as fuck, eyes rolled back, then bam, your dumb ass strokes out and dies mid-nut. Next thing you know, your soul gets yeeted into the body of the pathetic third son of the Rosnova family. Nobody gives a single fuck about you. Your old man looks at you like you're some cheap hooker's bastard mistake. Your brothers treat you like a daily punching bag, stomping your ass whenever they bored. Even the damn servants call you a worthless pussy behind your back and straight up ignore your orders. All cause your lazy ass never hit like on that video. But chill, I ain't that cruel. I'm hooking your new weak ass body with raw power, the kind that lets you wreck every single one of these motherfuckers. You just gotta start from the very beginning. Herbal Rosnova drops the bomb without any warning. His son's engagement to the Grand Duke Baldroba has already been finalized. Ferda stands silently in front of his father's desk, knowing this is not a marriage, but a death sentence. For a noble, those words mark the end of the road. The Duke looks at him with the coldness of someone throwing away a burden. He gives him only two choices: reject the arrangement and leave the family with nothing, or accept the engagement and end up torn apart by the dragon. It's ironic because all this boy ever wanted was to belong. Ferda was the third son, born to a concubine with a body so frail it was pitiful to watch. The servants did not even bother hiding their mockery as they watched him fail at training day after day. No one was on his side, yet he kept trying, enduring everyone's contempt. He believed that if he worked hard enough, if he never gave up, one day his father, Herbal, would truly acknowledge him. Poor Ferda held on to that hope even when his own eyes made him the target of insults. Urenova appears to remind him of his place, mocking an incompetent who dares to train as a knight. They knock him to the ground without any effort, leaving him surrounded by broken swords and humiliation. You don't even have the right to try, his own brother tells him, staring at him with disgust because of those filthy blue eyes. His desire to be accepted as family still ached deep inside his chest, but Herbal would not even bother looking at him, always turning his back on him. Until, one day everyone simply looked away from him forever. "I'll leave the family," Ferda declares, finally deciding to abandon that nest of vipers. The Duke does not even change his expression, accepting his son's exile as though it were nothing more than a routine matter. That night, Ferda walks through the gates of the Rosnova mansion carrying a small bag and a broken heart. He is no longer a Rosnova, and his father makes sure that truth is burned into his mind forever. His hands, covered in scars from efforts that no one ever cared about, tremble with pure rage. "I'll never forgive them." He swears those words to himself as his eyes change color from hatred. That was the exact moment something dark awakened within him. He left the city swearing that everyone would regret throwing him away like garbage. At the age of 18, Ferda awakened as a mage, but not just any mage. At the academy, the other apprentices laughed at him for starting far too late. They said his brain was already too old to understand even the basics of magic, but he did not care about their theories of peace and inner strength. Ferda's mana did not come from study. It came from a hatred that burned hotter than fire. A massive explosion silences the laughter of everyone who underestimated him. The more he hated his family, the more power flowed through his veins, turning him into a monster. He became a sixth circle archmage driven entirely by revenge, and he had only one goal in mind. He returned home and forced the servants who had insulted him to kill one another in a bloody frenzy. He made his brothers tear each other apart out of pure mutual hatred, enjoying every second of the massacre. Finally, it was his father's turn, the man who had hurt him the most. "Look me in the eyes, father," Ferda says as he grabs him by the throat in front of the ruins of his legacy. Herbal ended up begging for death after watching his precious Rosnova family disappear. Ferda stands there, covered in blood and empty inside, realizing that his revenge has finally been fulfilled. But when he looks into a mirror and sees those red eyes, he realizes that even all this power is still not enough. His hatred and rage did not fade. Instead, they spread across the entire continent like a plague. Ferda survived everything, reaching the 8th circle, the absolute peak of human magic, while the strongest warriors declared him the #1 enemy. He became a great mage, but he knew the world would never leave him in peace. Revenge would always follow him. That was why he needed to reach the 9th circle, the realm of demigods, to crush anyone who dared stand against him. While searching for a way to obtain that overwhelming power, he discovered the final ingredient he was missing. Fate is cruel, because what he needed was the heart of a dragon. His target was Sabrin Baldroba, the legendary red dragon. He needed her heart at any cost. Life's irony led him straight to the Forbidden Mountains where the creature lived. Baldroba greets him with a chilling calmness, commenting on how strange it is that her supposed fiancé has come to kill her. The colossal red dragon looks down at the small human standing before her, who seems completely insignificant by comparison. Ferda spits out blood, wounded after the intensity of a battle that has lasted for hours. Despite his exhaustion, He shouts at Baldroba, demanding that she die by his hands once and for all. The dragon admits that she knows the world calls her a tyrant, but she asks the young mage the true reason behind his hatred. Baldroba explains that she has remained hidden from humans since long before he was born, unable to understand what grievance brought him here. Ferda's eyes fill with pure fury at the monster's supposed ignorance. He yells that she is the root of all his misery because her foolish desire to find a fiancé was the reason his family cast him aside. Is it really our fault? Baldroba asks, her voice carrying what seems to be genuine sadness. Ferda is already shouting that yes, her very existence ruined his life and turned him into the miserable man he is today. Suddenly, the dragon becomes completely still, letting out a simple sigh that catches the mage off guard. Ferda is confused by the sudden shift in the atmosphere of the battle. He does not care what she thinks, and uses the moment to gather every last drop of mana he has left. Baldroba stares at him and says that she finally understands the situation. As the air fills with energy, the dragon unleashes what seems like a finishing attack, but something is different. Ferda raises his magical barriers, preparing for what he believes will be the final blow of his life. A dull sound echoes through the cave, followed by a burst of blood. Ferda's eyes widen as he realizes something is wrong with the dragon's attack. Baldroba has driven her own claws into her chest right before the protagonist's horrified eyes. The mage cannot believe what he is seeing. Why would a sovereign dragon do something like that? She reminds him that his magic requires a dragon's heart to be completed. Ferda panics when he realizes she is trying to destroy her own heart before giving it to him. That heart is his only chance to reach the ninth circle, and he refuses to let it be lost. He desperately casts a spell to stop the creature from taking her own life, shouting in pure frustration. A crimson glow surrounds Baldroba's body as she lets out a heartbreaking roar. Ferda curses the dragon, fearing that his chance at glory is disappearing before his eyes. Blood splatters across the cave walls as the creature's chest is torn completely open. A cry of denial escapes Ferda's lips as he witnesses the brutality of the scene. Baldroba's colossal body collapses onto the stone floor, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Ferda rushes toward her, desperately searching through the remains for any trace of the heart. Amid the carnage, a golden light shines with a supernatural brilliance. The heart is completely intact. The young mage is left speechless when he hears Baldroba's final wish. Take it. I don't understand you, Baldroba. Ferda murmurs as he realizes she could have killed him with ease at any moment. With her final breath, the dragon gives him her heart, admitting that she was the reason for his suffering and that this is her last gift. Baldroba confesses that for a long time they hated themselves because of the violent blood flowing through their veins. The great red dragon remembers how much she despised her own destructive nature. She could not control that irrational urge to destroy everything in her path. Her yellow eyes reflected the helplessness of being unable to stop her own fury. Her mere presence spread absolute terror through every village, leaving nothing but fire behind. She came to believe that her own death was the only way to end the chaos caused by her existence. Even so, she clung to life with the foolish dream of one day finding happiness. That selfish wish only brought more misfortune to those around her. As her final act, Baldroba begs Ferda to at least find happiness through this sacrifice. The dragon fades into the darkness, leaving her essence in the hands of the man who killed her. Ferda feels something twisting inside him as he holds the dragon's power. He wonders why obtaining the one thing he wanted so desperately leaves such a bitter taste in his mouth. He tries to push those doubts aside. He has come too far to regret anything now. The ninth circle is only one step away, right before his eyes, pulsing with energy. He raises the essence of the ancient dragon, a golden heart shining with the power of the sun. He knows that if he absorbs it, he will finally stop being an ordinary human. Ferda lets out a heartbreaking scream as the power begins rebuilding his very being. The energy completely surrounds him, breaking the limits of mortality and transforming him into a demigod. Suddenly, he finds himself floating in a dark void, his body glowing with an intense light. He is confused. He is certain he took the dragon's heart, but something is not going according to plan. He feels himself falling into an endless abyss of memories that do not belong to him. It is Baldroba's voice and presence surrounding him in that absolute darkness. A flood of overwhelming emotions crashes into him without warning. He realizes that he is experiencing the deepest feelings of the dragon he has just killed. In an instant, he sees everything: the loneliness, the pain, and Baldroba's true story. Ferda is left in shock, unable to process the magnitude of what he has just discovered. The dragon's ancient despair makes his own years of hatred seem insignificant and ridiculous. He breaks down in tears as he realizes he destroyed a beautiful soul who only wanted to find love in the world. What was it that I truly wanted so badly? he asks himself as his ambition falls apart. He no longer cares about revenge, power, or becoming a great mage. He sees the image of his younger self, a child who had not yet been corrupted by tragedy. All he ever wanted was something as simple as a family that loved him and a peaceful life. To his horror, he discovers that Baldroba shared that exact same simple dream. The dragon longed for the very same peace that he stole from her with his blood-stained hands. He returns to the harsh reality of the battlefield, where Baldroba's lifeless body lies at his feet. There is no longer any meaning in reaching the peak of power if the price was destroying his own humanity. With the power of the ninth circle, Ferda decides to risk everything on one final move. He activates the ultimate spell available to a mage of his level, Wish, with the intention of fixing the past. A familiar voice calls his name, pulling him out of the trance caused by the forbidden magic. Ferda opens his eyes in confusion and finds himself in a luxurious office that should have disappeared years ago. Standing before him is his father, Herbal Rosnova, looking at him with the same contempt as always. He realizes that he has returned to the exact day when his life first began to fall apart. Herbal Rosnova delivers the news that will change Ferda's life. His engagement to Grand Duchess Baldroba has already been arranged. His father looks at him coldly, assuming Ferda fully understands the political and personal consequences of this agreement. The warning is clear. If he rejects the engagement, the consequences for the Rosnova family will be devastating. Overwhelmed by the reality of returning to the past, Ferda feels the weight of every step he takes inside that room. To his father's surprise, Ferda accepts his fate without hesitation, showing a determination he never had before. He formally accepts the engagement, swearing to himself that this time he will not run away from his destiny with the dragon. Yurin Rosnova, the second son, cannot believe the rumors about his brother's engagement to the feared Baldroba. Yurin mocks Ferda, calling him too pathetic to willingly walk toward his own grave. The butler confirms that Ferda is still in his room, preparing to leave without causing any kind of scene. With a malicious smile, Urin decides to visit his brother and enjoy his misfortune before he departs. Meanwhile, Ferda is alone in his room, remaining so calm that anyone who knew him would find it unsettling. Urin storms into the room, shouting insults, surprised that Ferda has not left yet. Urin's expression changes to complete confusion when he sees his brother's calm and transformed demeanor. He expected to find Ferda crying and begging, not someone preparing for his departure with such composure. Ferda replies with icy calm, scolding his brother for entering without knocking. He explains that he dismissed the servants so he could get used to taking care of himself, knowing that he would have no one to help him in his new life. Urin wonders if this is really the same Ferda he once knew, unable to understand his sudden change in personality. Ferda calmly states that he knows perfectly well his family is sending him away to die. Urin insists that the engagement is nothing more than a death sentence, disguised as a noble duty. Ferda assures him that he knows everything very well, even better than Urin could ever imagine. Urin reminds him of the story of the Empire's third prince, Baldroba's first fiancé, who was the perfect man. That prince gave up his claim to the throne just to stay by the violent dragon's side, believing his love would be enough. However, less than a day after arriving in Baldroba's domain, the man met a tragic end at the hands of the beast. Yurin Rosnova, the second son of the family, lets out a mocking laugh as he ridicules his brother's fate. To him, this engagement is nothing more than a death sentence disguised as a noble duty. He recalls with contempt how Ferda had been humiliated endlessly in the past, treated like worthless trash. Urin points directly at Ferda Rosnova, arrogantly asking whether he truly believes he can survive an engagement that not even the third prince could endure. His older brother's air of superiority is unmistakable. He shrugs with disdain, saying that no one can stop a fool who chooses to walk straight into a dragon's jaws. To Urin, Ferda is already dead. He delivers one final threat. If Ferda tries to disobey the family and run away, he will personally cut off his head before the dragon ever gets the chance. The tension between them is overwhelming. Ferda stares him straight in the eyes without showing the slightest trace of fear. With icy calm, he suggests that his brother should worry more about keeping his own pants zipped. Urin's face twists with rage as Ferda drops the bomb. Everyone knows he has been looking at his older brother's wife in an indecent way. His dirty secret is exposed. Urin completely loses his temper and lunges at him, but Ferda simply raises a hand, telling him to control the urge to hit him in front of everyone. He is completely in control of the situation. With a cynical smile, Ferda remarks that it would be a shame if his face were ruined, now that he has a long journey ahead to the dragon's lair. He says goodbye with a grace that only infuriates his brother even more, picks up his luggage, and walks toward the carriage waiting outside the Rosnova mansion. It is the beginning of his exile, but he sees it as freedom from that toxic house. When he arrives, the Rosnova family's butler covers his face with a handkerchief, pretending to cry over his young master's departure. It is an award-worthy performance. The old servant claims it has been an honor to serve him all these years. As Ferda finishes arranging his belongings inside the carriage without even looking at him, he knows perfectly well that it is all a lie. If the butler had had truly cared about him, he would never have spent years trying to poison him slowly. A bitter memory crosses his mind. When he was a sick child confined to his bed, this very butler poured poison into his food under orders from his superiors. Everyone had been against him. For a brief moment, the bloodlust from his previous life resurfaces. He imagines himself squeezing the old man's throat until he stops breathing because of all that hypocrisy. But he restrains himself. Instead, Ferda places a hand on the butler's shoulder and sarcastically thanks him for working so hard all these years taking care of someone like him. He asks him to take good care of the Rosnova family while he is gone, leaving the man confused and visibly nervous because of the young man's unusual tone. The carriage finally pulls away from the imposing Rosnova mansion, leaving behind years of abuse and silent conspiracies. His journey into the unknown has begun. Sitting alone inside the carriage, Ferda is surprised to find that his mind is at peace. Perhaps it is because, in his previous life, he already carried out his revenge, and that fire has now burned out. He watches the scenery through the window, enjoying the peaceful journey as the carriage moves farther away from the capital. He no longer feels the desire to watch the world burn. He tells himself that the hatred and rage are gone. The carriage travels through dense forests, carrying him closer and closer to the forbidden territory. Even so, the shadow of his past as an archmage still lingers, reminding him of the bloodthirsty man he once was, covered in the blood of his enemies. He remembers that, to him, magic was like a drug. At first, it brought a feeling of absolute ecstasy, making him feel invincible as he reduced everything to ashes. But as his power grew, so did his addiction, becoming something completely uncontrollable that eventually consumed him. That manic smile had been the reflection of his own downfall. He even remembers the moment he obtained the dragon's heart, an immense power pulsing with destructive energy capable of changing the world. He had everything in the palm of his hand. Back in the present, his eyes reflect a deep sadness. He does not want to become the monster the world once feared ever again. He leans back in the carriage seat with his eyes closed, determined to reject that path of destruction. The silence of the journey is his only refuge for now. He lets out a long sigh. For the first time in a very long while, this strange sense of peace feels pleasant, almost comforting. Suddenly, the carriage comes to a sudden stop. The coachman, his voice trembling, announces that they have finally arrived at their destination. The fear in his voice is unmistakable. In front of them stands an old, weathered wooden sign that reads, "Beyond this point lies the Grand Duke's territory. Entry is strictly forbidden. It is the border of the dragon's realm." Ferda steps out of the carriage and finds himself standing alone in the middle of the road, watching as the coachman speeds away. The man does not waste a single second leaving after hearing the word dragon. The carriage disappears into a cloud of dust as the driver shouts for him to stay safe, even though his actions say otherwise by abandoning him to his fate. Sitting on top of his suitcase, Ferda reflects on his situation. Being free from constant surveillance is great, but if a wild beast decides to attack, he will be in serious trouble. He begins to consider that perhaps, after all, he might need to use a little magic to survive in this place. Maybe a simple fourth circle spell will be enough to keep the predators away. Suddenly, he notices a figure moving through the bushes. Someone has been watching him from the shadows of the forest. Ferda immediately goes on guard. A young maid with silver hair and calm eyes steps out from the undergrowth. She introduces herself formally as Lady Baldroba's personal attendant, leaving Ferda surprised by her sudden appearance. Ruri asks if he is the young Lord Ferda Rosnova. After he answers yes, she studies him with curiosity, evaluating the human who dared to come all the way here. She informs him that she will personally escort him to her lady's castle. With a graceful gesture, she points him toward the towering mountains rising in the distance. As they walk, Ferda recalls the history of the Arkan Empire, a great power that believed there was nothing it could not conquer. Its people lived intoxicated by their own power, ignoring the reality beyond their borders. That reality was the Eastern Continent, the land of demons, a region overrun by colossal monsters and calamities that humanity could never dream of conquering, a place where death lurks around every corner. Yet there was someone who managed to stop those hordes and rule the front lines, the Grand Duke Baldroba, the majestic red dragon whose very presence makes the earth tremble beneath her fiery breath. Following Ruri, Ferda thinks Baldroba's infamous reputation is unfair. She built the only defense against the demons, and yet humans still call her the demonic dragon out of nothing but fear and ingratitude. Ferda recalls the rumors surrounding Baldroba. People say she is secretly raising an army of monsters in the shadows. Of course, no one has the courage to say it to her face. Ruri walks calmly, assuring him that as long as he stays with her, he has nothing to worry about. With her by his side, no beast in the forest would dare attack. Ferda can only thank her, though deep down he remains on guard. "How much farther?" he asks, already feeling exhausted. "About 2 hours," she replies as if it were nothing. Ruri admits that if she were alone, she could fly there in 10 seconds. She is basically calling him a burden right to his face. Ferda watches the way she moves and becomes convinced that she is no ordinary maid. When he notices her white scaled tail, his suspicions are confirmed. She is a high-ranking dragon spawn, a being whose strength and magic are on an entirely different level. He plants his staff into the ground to push himself forward and keep up. Ferda is trembling as he carries his heavy suitcase. Ruri teases him, asking if he wants her to fly him there, which would mean she would have to carry him like a baby. He tries to act tough, saying he can handle flying, but she immediately cuts him off. No, I just don't want to. The two of them remain standing in the middle of the forest, with Ferda looking like he is on the verge of physical collapse. Ferda suggests taking a short break, but Ruri refuses. Her lady is waiting for him, and there is no time to waste. He wears the expression of a walking corpse as he makes one last desperate effort to keep moving. As evening falls over the mountains, Ferda realizes that getting married is going to be much harder than he ever imagined. At last, they arrive at the castle gates, and Ruri firmly knocks on the massive stone wall. Master, your fiancé has arrived, she announces before the gigantic iron gates. Ferda starts breaking into a cold sweat. The aura coming from inside is so overwhelming that he can barely breathe. It is the pure power of a dragon. Ruri stops him immediately. She will receive Baldroba's response first. Ferda asks if they cannot speak face to face. She reveals her dragon eye, intimidating him to the fullest. Do you really think someone like you is worthy of standing before her? She asks. Ferda gets the message immediately. Ruri closes her eyes to communicate telepathically, and a moment later, she receives Grand Duke Baldroba's reply. An imposing image of the red dragon appears before them. The message acknowledges his courage for making it this far despite knowing her brutal nature. But then comes an unexpected turn. Baldroba does not want a forced engagement and orders him to return the way he came. Ferda is left in shock. He traveled all this way only to be rejected at the entrance. He thinks that in his previous life he would have gladly accepted the gold and run away without looking back, just to escape the danger. But things are different now. Being here is his own choice, and he has no intention of turning back so easily. I don't want to go back. I want to proceed with our engagement, Ferda declares firmly, leaving Ruri completely stunned. Ruri looks at him with deep hatred, but he simply asks whether she is going to deliver his answer. In the end, she reluctantly agrees. Out of nowhere, Ruri pulls out a giant bag filled to the brim with gold coins. Baldroba praises his determination, but still insists that if he is afraid of returning empty-handed, here is enough wealth to start over somewhere else. The image of the dragon sitting atop piles of gold is unmistakable. She is trying to buy her own freedom. Ferda looks at the mountains of gold, but he remains unmoved. I have no interest in power or wealth, he says. He raises his hand with determination as he reveals his true intentions to the magical projection. He kneels before Baldroba's image and swears that his only desire is to become engaged to her. Ruri lets out a frustrated sigh. Fed up with what she believes is an obvious and ambitious lie, she clenches her fist and begins releasing a terrifying red energy that makes the air tremble. Ruri points her finger at Ferda. I'm not wasting any more time. Leave, right now, she orders, pointing toward the exit. Ferda is confused, thinking it is a short message from the dragon, but Ruri makes it clear that those words come directly from her as Baldroba's attendant. Ruri begins to transform, extending her claws and revealing her true wild nature. In her full dragon spawn form, her aura becomes so dense that the ground starts cracking beneath her feet. Ferda is struck by the pressure. It is dragon fear, a technique capable of paralyzing any mortal through sheer terror. He collapses to the ground as Ruri looks at him with disgust, convinced he is just another worthless human driven by greed. Ruri tells him the harsh truth. The third prince died because he tried to take advantage of Lady Baldroba. According to Ruri, his head was filled with schemes to exploit the great dragon, and that is why he met such a terrible end. Seeing her eyes burning with murderous intent, it is clear that she does not feel the slightest pity for the deceased. She walks toward him with steady steps, calling him arrogant for daring to ask for a direct audience. Suddenly, Ferda feels an overwhelming pressure that slams him to the ground. Ruri makes it clear that, in her eyes, he is no different from the greedy prince before him. Do you want to die the same miserable death? She asks, as Ferda struggles to breathe beneath her dragon spawn aura. But to the maid's surprise, Ferda shows no fear. Instead, a faint, defiant smile appears on his face in the middle of the crisis. I, Ferda Rosnova, swear here without a single trace of deception, he begins, with a determination Ruri never expected. He declares that he is not there because anyone forced him to come, nor is he seeking selfish gain, earning a moment of respect from those around him. In his mind, Ferda remembers the distant past when Baldroba gave him her heart, and he decides that this time things will be different. Surrounded by a mystical glow, he swears that in this new life he will remain by the great dragon's side. Looking directly into Ruri's eyes, he demands that she tell her lady they should speak face to face instead of through intermediaries. Ruri clenches her fists. her claws extending once again. She cannot believe the audacity of this arrogant bastard. How dare he say such nonsense? She rages inwardly as she prepares to attack him again with all her fury. Just as she is about to tear him apart, something suddenly stops her, as though she has received a direct mental command. Instantly regaining her composure, she apologizes and tells him to wait while she consults her lady. Inside the castle, Ruri kneels before her mistress and repeats the human's words exactly as he said them. She reports that the young man has officially introduced himself as Baldroba's fiancé. She addresses her as Grand Duchess Baldroba, one of the 12 rulers, whose mere silhouette commands absolute respect. Baldroba's voice echoes through the hall as she asks with curiosity whether the man truly said all of that. The Grand Duchess appears as an imposing woman with long red hair and black horns. Intrigued by the human's courage, "What did you think of him?" she asks. Ruri replies that he seems like an incredibly weak human who nearly died on the way to the castle. She even says he is horribly ugly and suggests throwing him out immediately to avoid wasting any more time. However, she immediately has to take it back and admit that he actually has a remarkably handsome face that could easily steal hearts. Ruri wears an unhappy expression as she is forced to admit something good about a mere human. In the end, she can only admit that Ferda is, at the very least, a very unusual man. She explains to her lady that she tried to intimidate him with her dragon spawn aura, which should have been an easy task, but to her astonishment, the man did not show even the slightest hint of fear under that overwhelming pressure. Ruri concludes that, strangely enough, this human should be able to look the Grand Duchess directly in the eyes. The maid continues thinking about the encounter, still irritated by the supernatural calm Ferda displayed. Baldroba simply replies, "Excellent," showing that her interest has been completely awakened. Seated majestically, the red dragon reflects on how rare it is to find a human capable of meeting her gaze. At last, she makes a decision. She will meet him in person, without tricks or intimidation beforehand. Ruri is left speechless. "Normally, master," she begins, unable to believe that Baldroba is willing to ignore protocol for the sake of a human. Defeated by her lady's order, Ruri leaves the hall wearing an expression of complete resignation. Outside, she informs a surprised Ferda that her mistress has agreed to proceed with the engagement. Without wasting any time, Ruri leads him through the castle's grand hallways to his new room. As soon as he steps inside, Ferda is impressed by how luxurious and well-maintained everything is. It is far better than he expected. Noticing that there is not a single speck of dust, he asks who takes care of the place, and Ruri replies that she does it all herself. In a rather sharp tone, she reminds him that she is the only servant, and for now, he is nothing more than a guest. Ferda asks if she should not be calling him her lady's fiancé instead, but she answers firmly, "Until the ceremony takes place, you're only guest number 1. As Ruri looks at him with hatred intense enough to pierce through walls, Ferda cannot help thinking that she is like an extremely loyal guard dog. Getting straight to the point, Ferda asks when the engagement ceremony will be. Ruri tells him it will take place in 1 month. The ceremony will be held privately inside the dragon's lair, with only the 3 of them present. "I see," Ferda replies as he adjusts his glove, processing the information. He quietly murmurs to himself that 1 month should be enough time for what he has planned. Ruri watches him with skepticism, remaining silent as he thinks. She makes it clear that the month is not a gift. It is his deadline to prove that he is truly worthy. With an authoritative gesture, she warns him that the companion of her great mistress must possess status worthy of standing beside her. "Prove that you're qualified to be her fiancé," Ruri demands, pointing firmly at him. Ferda sighs, realizing that marrying a dragon is going to be an extremely difficult task. He asks whether this test is his lady's wish. Ruri admits that it is entirely her own decision. She believes her mistress is too soft, and she has no intention of letting just any human get close to her without earning that right. She demands that he prove his weak human body possesses at least some hidden potential. Ferda imagines the magnitude of the challenge. Looking at the shadow of the dragon cast over an empty throne, he pictures other powerful men who would never be accepted as the Grand Duchess's companion. Ferda thinks to himself that his fiancée has an incredibly loyal and capable servant by her side. He realizes that even though Ruri hates him, she always puts her mistress's interests above everything else. Ferda wonders why someone so loyal was not by Baldroba's side during the tragic ending he remembers from his previous life. He recalls the painful image of the dragon giving him her heart in the darkness. Ferda accepts the challenge and asks how far he must go to satisfy her. Become the emperor? Ruri tells him not to be ridiculous. It will be enough if the other rulers do not look down on him. "Very well, I accept," Ferda says with a calm smile that only frustrates the maid even more. Ruri cannot understand how he can remain so relaxed in the face of a task that seems impossible for a mortal. She wonders whether he is underestimating dragons or if he is simply a fool. With complete calm, Ferda replies that it is neither. He assures Ruri that she has nothing to worry about, promising that in just 1 month he will show her abilities that will satisfy her. Ruri looks at him skeptically, silently wondering where this human gets such confidence. Night falls over the magnificent mansion, illuminated by the light of the full moon. Ferda walks through the hallways, fully aware that at this moment he does not possess even the slightest trace of power. He remembers his previous life as a Ninth Circle mage, an experience that made him unique across the continent. He is confident that if he can retain the instincts he had back then, recovering his former level is entirely possible. He knows the first circle is the most critical stage for any mage because it determines the nature of their mana circuit. There is the blue circle, which is formed through meditation and inner peace. It is a slow path, but an extremely stable one. On the other hand, the red circle is born from volatile and explosive emotions. In his previous life, Ferda became a great mage fueled entirely by hatred, which eventually drove him insane. He knows that returning to that path would make him much stronger much faster, but he has no intention of repeating his mistakes. He clenches his jaw, determined not to let the darkness consume him again. This time, he will choose a different path to ensure that his will remains unshakable. A week passes, and the mansion remains peaceful beneath the midday sun. Ferda sits on the floor meditating, trying to connect with his mana. He pushes himself to the limit, sweating as he struggles to stabilize the blue energy gathering in his hands. He lets out a frustrated sigh. He has failed once again. He thought his memories would make it easier, but the nature of the blue circle is completely different from that of the red circle. He has only 3 weeks left. Ruri enters the room carrying a tray of food and asks if he is still training. She serves him a bowl of hot stew while sarcastically remarking that nothing about him seems to have changed. As Ferda begins eating, he replies that everything will happen in due time. Ruri only watches him with annoyance. As he eats, Ferda admits to himself that he has made no real progress and needs a different approach. Suddenly, a violent tremor shakes the entire room, causing Ferda to stop in his tracks. He asks what caused the vibration. Ruri explains that her mistress is subjugating monsters. Ferda falls silent at the mention of the hunt. Ruri adds that Baldroba is personally clearing out the land of demons in the east. Baldroba's name echoes through his mind. Ferda looks up with interest. Without hesitation, he says that he wants to witness that battle with his own eyes. Ruri is surprised by the request. Her expression turns serious as she warns him that it would be better if he did not go. She explains that an ordinary human could never watch a dragon fight and remain sane. Ruri advises him to stay at the mansion unless he wants to end up wetting himself in fear right before the engagement ceremony. Ferda slams his hand on the table and firmly says no. He stands up and declares that, as Baldroba's future partner, it is his duty to witness that battle. Ruri finally gives in. She surrounds him with a gust of wind as they prepare to leave. Spreading her dragon wings, Ruri picks him up, and they soar through the sky at breathtaking speed. "We're here," she announces. They land abruptly on a grassy cliff. Ferda drops to his knees, completely dizzy. The speed at which Ruri flew felt almost like teleportation. With his stomach churning, Ferda tries to recover. Ruri coldly tells him to get up and look ahead. She warns him that she is not the one he should be looking at right now. Ferda focuses his gaze. His eyes widen as he sees what is happening on the horizon. Before them, a violent, dark energy swirls across the battlefield. Ferda is left breathless, breaking into a cold sweat at the sheer scale of the chaos before him. He is face to face with the nightmare known as the Land of Demons. So that's where Baldroba fights, he says in amazement. In her magnificent dragon form, Baldroba charges into the monsters, tearing them apart with overwhelming force that makes the earth tremble. An explosion of fire engulfs the battlefield as she destroys everything in her path without showing a shred of mercy. The gigantic serpent-like creatures try to surround her, but her mere presence seems to paralyze them. With a swift sweep of her claws, Baldroba rips through her enemies, producing a harsh metallic screech. Her eyes blaze with fierce intensity as she prepares her next attack. There is no escape for the monsters. Baldroba raises her head, gathering scorching energy in her throat that lights up the entire cliff. She unleashes a colossal blast of dragon fire that instantly incinerates dozens of creatures, reducing them to ashes. Ruri watches the scene calmly, already accustomed to the devastation her mistress is capable of causing. The dragon lets out a roar so powerful that the air itself seems to vibrate, a sound that fills every living being with terror. Spreading her wings, Baldroba rises above the sea of flames, reaffirming her dominion over the land. Ferda feels the roar strike him like a physical blow. leaving him stunned and unable to breathe. Unable to remain standing under such overwhelming pressure, he collapses to the ground, completely overcome by the dragon's power. Frodo realizes that he had forgotten what it meant to face such absolute and overwhelming power. He trembles violently, clinging to the ground as he struggles to catch his breath beneath Baldroba's overwhelming roar. Ruri looks down at him with contempt, remarking how absurd it is for a mere mortal to believe he can form a bond with a dragon. She points to the true form of the one who is meant to become his partner, a being of pure destruction surrounded by flames. She insists that the idea of a human standing beside a dragon is ridiculous, almost an insult to nature itself. Ruri declares that this is the true essence of the being Ferda intends to marry. Ferda continues trembling on the ground, his body instinctively reacting to the fear radiating from the dragon. Ruri admits that this is exactly why she warned him not to come. The psychological consequences for a human are devastating. She explains that the blood of a red dragon contains what humans call the essence of the evil dragon. It is a violent instinct to kill that cannot exist without destruction, something innate to her kind. Ruri asks whether he finally understands what it means to become the companion of such a creature. She knows that determination alone will never be enough. She declares that a human and a dragon can never truly become one, and that before long, even Baldroba will realize how pointless it is to dream of such a thing. Ferda slowly lifts his head, a faint smile appearing on his lips. He quietly murmurs, "It's simply magnificent." Ruri is left speechless, wondering if he is actually smiling in a moment like this. She takes a step back in horror as she realizes that Ferda is not feeling fear but admiration. She shouts at him, calling him a crazy masochist, unable to understand how anyone could be fascinated by such slaughter. Back at the mansion, night blankets the castle walls in complete silence. Ferda lies in bed processing everything he witnessed. He knew it would be shocking, but reality exceeded his expectations. His body feels completely wrecked after enduring dragon fear and Baldroba's overwhelming roar. Ruri brought him back and laid him in bed so he could recover from the shock. Ferda closes his eyes, thinking that it is a miracle his mind remains intact after witnessing such incredible power. If this keeps up, he'll lose an entire day. He asks himself why he wanted to witness that battle in the first place. It was terrifying, he admits, but when he remembers the image of Baldroba standing in the middle of the flames, something inside him stirs in a way that is different from fear. That deafening roar still echoes in his ears, reminding him of the dragoness's ferocity. Despite the overwhelming terror he felt, Ferda realizes that he wants to keep watching her, that he cannot look away. He pictures Baldroba tearing through monsters at the edge of the world, alone in her endless battle. He understands that all of that violence is, at its core, to protect what she loves. It is a constant sacrifice. He sees her as a noble red dragon knight who chose a life of suffering and solitude at the heart of chaos. Ferda lets himself be carried away by that feeling of awe. How magnificent, he thinks as a new determination is born within him. He pauses to think that he and Baldroba will soon be bound together, and the thought fills him with an unexpected surge of emotion. While meditating alone in his room, Ferda senses an unusual vibration coming from the crimson gem on his necktie. He feels that this kind of mana is dangerous, and knows he must reject it if he does not want to repeat the tragedies of his previous life. Suddenly, a vision of Baldroba fighting with unmatched ferocity flashes through his mind, causing a painful tightness in his chest. He realizes that remembering that battle is clearing his mana circuit. This emotion is not born from hatred or revenge. Ferda narrows his eyes, focusing all his will on understanding the true nature of this unique feeling. He wonders what to call this one-of-a-kind emotion, as he envisions himself standing in an ocean of crimson energy, threatening to scatter. He devotes his entire focus to compressing the mana and making it spin faster and faster between his hands. A whirlwind of crimson energy surrounds him, testing the limits of his mental endurance as he struggles to stabilize the flow. With one final effort, he concentrates on forming a single circle of light to represent his new mastery over mana. A perfect red magic circle appears above his hand. Ferda swears to himself that this time he will not repeat the mistakes of his past. The young noble grips his chest with determination, convinced that his future will take a completely different path. The next morning, Ruri is stunned to discover that Ferda has purified his mana circuit in just a single night. Ferda calmly admits that he was able to do it because he is not an ordinary person, while Ruri watches him with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. After breakfast, Ferda wipes himself off with elegance and asks if there is a suitable place where he can test his magic. Ruri admits that, against all expectations, he has met the qualifications needed to begin his training. She assures him that the training grounds are ready, though she still cannot understand how he recovered so quickly from his previous condition. Under a clear sky, Straw Target stands silently in the middle of an open field, surrounded by rolling hills. Ruri puts the finishing touches on the training ground, demonstrating her efficiency as an attendant of the House of Dragons. With a theatrical gesture, the maid presents Ferda with the training range she prepared herself according to his instructions. Ferda gives a light round of applause, impressed that she managed to set up an entire training field in just half a day. Ruri asks in confusion why he requested such simple targets instead of high-grade magical equipment. He replies that he needs to train his mana control, which Ruri finds about as unnecessary as practicing how to breathe. Ruri warns him that other dragon spawn would laugh at him, calling such methods primitive and unnecessary. Ferda quietly reflects that those born as natural geniuses could never understand the value of effort accumulated through human perseverance. Driven by curiosity, she cannot hide behind her cold demeanor. Ruri asks for permission to watch him practice. Ferda walks toward the targets, thinking that stability is the key to mastering mana, the fundamental principle of the blue circle. However, his circle is red, forcing him to release his emotions while maintaining absolute control over them. He bitterly recalls that, in his previous life, it took him an entire year to learn how to draw mana from such a violent current, and another full year to condense that energy into a perfect sphere, a technique forged through blood and sweat. But now, with the mind of a veteran, it takes him only 2 minutes to recreate that same technique with astonishing ease. Ruri is left speechless when a flawless sphere of mana appears on his very first attempt without wasting a single trace of energy. Ferda creates 3 crimson projectiles that float before him, ready to be fired with surgical precision. He aims steadily at the targets, concentrating destructive power at the tip of his index finger. With a whisper of fire, he releases a burst of crimson energy that streaks across the training field like lightning. The mana blast completely pulverizes the center target, causing an explosion that leaves Ruri speechless. Ferda looks satisfied, confirming that his abilities have not deteriorated despite starting over in this world. Ruri keeps a serious expression, unable to take her eyes off the destruction caused by someone who is supposedly only a beginner mage. Later, Ruri presents her detailed report on Ferda's progress before the imposing figure of Grand Duchess Baldroba. Baldroba listens with curiosity, wondering what impression the human truly made on someone so familiar with the outside world. The maid explains that Ferda was suspiciously flawless, which in her opinion makes him a dangerous and suspicious individual. Ruri insists that no human can be that perfect by nature, and is convinced that he is a perverted masochist hiding something. Baldroba concludes that if Ruri is this cautious, then Ferda must be an extraordinary man, something the maid reluctantly admits. A faint smile appears on Baldroba's face as she decides to give Ferda the benefit of the doubt and trust his intentions. Ruri, however, cannot help remembering with bitterness how deeply her mistress had been hurt by humans in the past. As she places a hand over her chest, Ruri swears that she will never allow that to happen again, and is determined to test the young man's true intentions. A sharp look crosses her face as she resolves to protect her mistress's heart from any possible deception. Ruri suggests that Baldroba take this opportunity to entrust Ferda with that matter and see how he reacts. Baldroba raises an eyebrow in curiosity, asking if she truly means giving him that responsibility. Inside the assembly hall, the herald's voice echoes loudly as he officially announces the arrival of Ferda Rosnova. The lords of the Eastern Front, seated around the round table, murmur skeptically at the Grand Duchess's unusual summons. The nobles complain about having to receive a fiancé when the threat of monsters is so immediate and dangerous. Rumors about the third son of the Rosnova family spread quickly, questioning whether anyone had truly accepted the engagement. The hall erupts with ridicule toward the 18-year-old, calling him a defective noble who cannot even wield a sword. Count Olvera Cancillus watches the scene with his hands folded together, maintaining an air of calm superiority amid the commotion. With complete cynicism, Count Olvera Cancillus says that Baldroba will probably tear this new fiancé apart before long. The massive doors swing open, revealing Ferda Rosnova as he walks gracefully toward the assembled lords. A short while earlier, Ferda had been absorbed in his books, wondering why he needed to meet with the nobles so soon. Ruri firmly explains that this is a responsibility he must face, because his role within the duchy is about to change dramatically. Ferda listens carefully as he closes his book, fully aware that his peaceful days are about to end. Ruri tells him Baldroba's story. She was the one who slew the Black Dragon, Godwen, the embodiment of darkness. Because of that unprecedented achievement, the Empire granted her the title of Grand Duchess and absolute authority over these lands. Since Baldroba must devote herself to subjugating monsters, Ferda will be responsible for governing the territory. Ruri explains that Baldroba will handle external affairs, while Ferda must manage the household and oversee the local lords. Ferda wonders whether that makes him the master of the house, as he pictures the contrast between Baldroba's battles and his own bureaucratic duties. He suspects that giving him so much authority is simply another way for Baldroba to keep an eye on him, but he accepts the challenge without changing his calm expression. Back in the assembly hall, Ferda stands before the nobles, and proudly introduces himself as the future husband of Grand Duchess Baldroba. Ferda faces the nobles with complete composure and begins with a single question. How would you prefer to address me? He knows that the moment they answer, the hierarchy will be established once and for all. The confused nobles do not know whether to treat him as an outcast or as the future husband of the Grand Duchess. Count Olvera Concilius, an elderly noble with an impeccably groomed white beard, speaks first with a smile that never reaches his eyes. He says that they are all nobles under the Grand Duchess's rule. Olvera states that they should, of course, show respect to her future husband, but then deliberately leaves the sentence hanging. The elderly lord reminds him that everyone present swore loyalty to the empire long before he was born. He tries to use his seniority to pressure the young man. He suggests that, as the Grand Duchess's future husband, Ferda should also show them the proper courtesy. The other nobles nod in agreement, encouraged by his words. Ferda remains completely unfazed and asks him, "Is that your final answer?" He wants to know once and for all whether they will speak to him with respect or whether he should treat them as his inferiors. His gaze turns icy as he demands a clear answer. The atmosphere in the hall becomes tense in an instant. Count Olvera breaks into a cold sweat and immediately gives in. He admits that it is only proper for Ferda to address them as his subordinates. The protagonist accepts the answer without emotion. Ferda tells them that very little will change once he marries. He gives them permission to continue governing their territories however they wish, whether they rule well or exploit their people. Tesselos Vulture, a heavily built man wearing a green cloak, erupts in anger at the mention of exploitation. He slams his fist on the table and demands to know whether Ferda is accusing them of extortion. Ferda casually apologizes, saying it was simply a slip of the tongue. His attitude only infuriates the noble even more. Tesselos says that now he understands why Ferda's family cast him out. He cannot stand the idea of an apprentice pretending to be a mage in front of them. He demands that Ferda show respect to his superiors and mockingly calls him a first circle fiancé. He points out that he is a fourth circle mage and far more capable. Ferda repeats Tesselos's words with contempt. His opponent's rank clearly does not impress him in the slightest. He comments that a mage's rank is determined only by skill. To him, the fourth circle is merely decent. In the background, a crimson magic circle begins to shine brightly. Tesselos is beside himself with rage. He cannot believe that a novice dares to insult him like that, and he swears he will teach him some manners by force. Ferda raises a hand to stop him and makes an offer he knows Tesselos cannot refuse. The political tension is about to turn into a physical conflict. He proposes a duel to test the abilities of this so-called first circle mage. Ferda keeps a completely bored expression as he challenges him. A duel between a first circle mage and a fourth circle mage. The news spreads like wildfire as preparations for the fight begin. The other nobles whisper among themselves that the outcome is obvious. Ruri, the silver-haired maid, watches the scene with a neutral expression, waiting to see what her new master is capable of. Everyone wonders whether Tesselos will show Ferda any mercy. The difference in their levels seems like an insurmountable gap to everyone watching. In the training yard, the two men take their positions. The place is magnificent, worthy of a duel between high-ranking nobles. Ferda calmly asks what kind of magic his opponent plans to use. It sounds more like casual conversation than a fight to the death. Tesselos laughs, saying it is bad manners to ask someone to reveal their hand during a duel. He is completely convinced that victory is already his. He mocks Ferda, asking if he is afraid, and gives him one last chance to surrender before it is too late. His arrogance knows no bounds. He announces that he will use Magic Blast, an extremely destructive fourth circle spell. A crimson aura begins swirling violently around him. The spectators are horrified. They know that if Ferda is hit directly by that spell, he most likely will not survive to tell the tale. Ferda replies that, in that case, he will also reveal what he plans to use. A simple mana shot. The difference in power between the two spells is ridiculous. Tesselos bursts into mocking laughter. He cannot believe Ferda thinks he can defeat him with such a basic and weak spell. He feels insulted by the lack of seriousness. Ferda simply remarks that he knows far more than he lets on. His confidence begins to make Tesselos uneasy. Despite his theoretical advantage, the noble is already shouting insults as he channels all of his magic. The magic circle shines with dangerous intensity, ready to attack. Tesselos swears he will erase Ferda from existence without leaving a trace. The amount of mana he is gathering is excessive for a practice duel. Ferda notices the bloodlust and realizes that his opponent is deliberately increasing the spell's power. He concludes that Tesselos also possesses a red circle fueled by intense emotions. With an air of superiority, Ferda prepares his mana projectiles and quietly pities his opponent's bad luck. Tesselos launches his attack. For a brief moment, Tesselos is stunned by the precision of Ferda's movements. Something in the atmosphere has suddenly changed. Ferda calmly declares that the duel is already over. He fires his mana spheres with surgical accuracy that defies all logic. The impact is imminent. Tesselos tries to react, but the speed of Ferda's attack is far beyond what he expected from a first circle mage. The noble is confused. Ferda's projectiles fly past him without touching him, making him briefly question his opponent's aim. He realizes his mistake too late. Ferda was never aiming at his body. He was targeting the weaknesses in his incomplete magic circle. Tesselos's magic circle is struck directly at its structural weak points. The spell begins to collapse violently before it can even be cast. The magic circle shatters into countless fragments of light. Tesselos is left speechless, unable to understand how someone destroyed a fourth circle spell with such a simple basic spell. He cannot process what has just happened. A first circle mage destroyed his technique as if it were made of paper. He stares at the wreckage, admitting to himself that even he would not be capable of such a feat. His hand trembles against the ground as all of his arrogance vanishes in an instant. He gasps for breath, completely exhausted as he struggles to process the harsh reality of what just happened. He lowers his head in defeat. The only thing left in his mind is the echo of his failure before everyone present. Ferda walks toward him with a calmness that sends chills down his spine and asks him directly, "Do you surrender?" Tesselos begins to stammer, trying to process the public humiliation. Instead of hatred, his defeat ignites a desperate desire to become stronger. He formally surrenders and assures Ferda that he will do whatever it takes to gain more power. The other nobles murmur in shock. They cannot believe that a fourth circle mage has been defeated by a novice. Ruri appears behind one of the horrified nobles and suggests that if they cannot believe what they are seeing, they should tear out their own eyes. Tesselos tries to salvage what little dignity he has left and praises Ferda's technique, although he claims it was a close call. He mentions his past in the capital, trying to sound important even while remaining on his knees. Ferda asks for his full name with a coldness that should have put him on alert. When he hears the name Tesselos Vulture, Ferda remembers exactly who he is from his previous life. His expression turns icy. He recalls that, in the future, this man became his supposed benefactor. Without another word, Ferda places his finger directly against Tessalos's forehead. The noble does not understand what is happening. Ferda fires a mana shot at point-blank range before Tesselos can even react. Blood splatters violently. The execution is swift, clean, and brutal. The nobles present are frozen in place, absolute terror written across their faces. Tesselos's body falls to the ground, lifeless. Ferda looks down at him without a trace of remorse. He justifies the act by saying he could not allow him to live because he would only bring misfortune upon his fiancée. The arena falls completely silent, broken only by the wind sweeping across the grounds. A close look at the corpse confirms that Ferda has executed a high-ranking noble in front of everyone. Panic erupts among the lords. This is outright noble murder. They are horrified because he killed Tesselos after the duel had officially ended. With blood smeared across his face, Ferda wonders who would dare oppose him now. He calmly walks toward the exit and casually asks why everyone looks so tense. He turns around and tells them not to worry, because the man simply deserved to die. Count Olvera stammers in fear, unable to understand what this death has to do with the Grand Duchess. A disturbing smile spreads across Ferda's face as blood runs down his cheek. He says that Tesselos was acting directly against his fiancée's wishes, no matter how loyal he appeared. He mentions that it is something that will happen in the distant future, leaving the lords convinced that he has lost his mind. He makes it clear that he does not care what the rest of them think or do. His warning has been delivered. The scene shifts to a carriage speeding away from the estate. The journey is not treating Ferda well. He looks terrible. He clutches his head. That single mana shot has completely drained his magical energy. It was a risky move that exhausted all of his mana reserves just to send a message. In his chibi form, he bitterly complains about the dizziness and the lack of modern cars in this world. Rory scolds him for killing an important noble, saying that it will complicate the engagement ceremony. Ferda sarcastically asks whether she truly believes that man was a loyal servant. He wonders if Tesselos was really innocent, suspecting that he was hiding dark secrets. Ferda explains that Tesselos was mediocre, but that the other lords are even worse, stealing even during wartime. He insists that the engagement ceremony will proceed as planned, because he had more than enough reason to kill Vulture. He looks completely exhausted. Using such advanced magic in such a weak body is taking its toll. If his memory has not failed him, the definitive proof of Tesselos's betrayal is very close by. They arrive at the imposing Vulture family castle just as the sun begins to disappear beyond the horizon. The Vulture family's butler, an elderly man with an impeccable appearance, comes out to receive the Grand Duchess's guests. Ferda calmly drops the bombshell. The lord of this house is dead, so you don't need to worry about him anymore. Without giving him time to react, Ruri throws a heavy, mysterious sack at the bewildered butler. She orders him to hang whatever is inside the sack somewhere clearly visible from the castle gates. The poor man freezes when he realizes that what he is holding is the severed head of his late lord. The castle is bathed in an ominous twilight as they prepare to search the estate. They enter the luxurious bedroom of Tesselos Vulture, determined to uncover the noble's dirty secrets. Ruri warns Ferda that they had better find evidence of corruption, or the public execution will be very difficult to justify. Bingo. Ferda discovers a secret door hidden beneath the lord's bed. There really was something to hide. He feels around the floor, searching for the mechanism to open it, but it does not seem like it will be easy. Ferda asks his assistant to step aside. He knows Ruri has a much faster way of opening doors. Ruri's eyes sharpen as she raises her fist. She has no patience for mechanical puzzles. Boom. With a single punch, she shatters the wooden and stone floor, revealing the hidden entrance. With the path open, Ferda invites her to go down. The real investigation begins. The stone staircase descends into a dense darkness filled with an oppressive presence. The smell of blood is unbearable. At the bottom, they find a horrifying scene of death. It is a secret laboratory filled with the fused corpses of humans and monsters. Tesselos was not an ordinary noble. He was a follower of the demons who sought power at any cost. He was a necromancer who used the bodies of his own soldiers for his twisted experiments. Ruri's expression turns fierce at the sight of such an abomination. Her disgust is unmistakable. She comments that humans truly are beyond saving, selling away their humanity for a little dark magic. Ruri asks how Ferda knew this hidden place even existed, but he is distracted by a document. He has found Tesselos's secret masterpiece. It is the infinite mana cultivation method, a forbidden technique that defies the laws of nature. The document explains that monsters generate mana continuously, unlike humans. The laboratory was dedicated to replicating that natural mana generation inside human bodies. If pure mana could be produced without interruption, a mage could possess limitless power without ever exhausting their reserves. The original researcher dreamed of breaking the limits of the magic circles and becoming invincible. His plan was to use that power to slaughter the nobles who had looked down on him, as well as the demonic dragon herself. In his previous life, a far more experienced Ferda was the one who put an end to this madness. That encounter ended with the sorcerer's death, and Ferda taking possession of his most valuable research. Now fate has placed that very same method into his hands once again in this new life. With this research, he could reach the 8th magic circle far faster than anyone could imagine. Ruri watches him suspiciously, noticing that, after all, he also seems to desire forbidden power. She tells him that no one would ever know if he decided to take the document now that its creator is dead. Ferda weighs his options as he stares at the paper. The power is tempting, but the risks are enormous. In the end, he orders Ruri to destroy the entire laboratory. He does not want to leave any trace of it behind. Ruri is stunned. She cannot believe that Ferda does not feel even the slightest temptation in the face of such forbidden knowledge. Ferda admits that the research is revolutionary, but wonders what good it is if it only brings misery. He would rather wipe out this evil right now before the temptation causes even more pain to his future wife, the Grand Duchess. With a cold, determined look, he repeats the order. Burn everything until there's nothing left. Ruri accepts the task. To her, destroying something so despicable is one of the easiest things she could do. Blue flames begin consuming the documents, erasing Tesselos Vulture's sins forever. Ferda reflects on how magic always reflects the emotions and the true nature of the one who casts it. Tesselos's magic was saturated with the same deep hatred he felt toward the Empire, and it ultimately consumed him. The noble also possessed a red circle, a sign of an inferiority complex and the resentment that Ferda knows all too well. If he were to accept that dark magic, Ferda fears he would once again be consumed by emotions he could no longer control. He decides to leave that hatred behind along with the version of himself who had to hate in order to survive. He watches the flames with a strange sense of inner peace. Everything is burning exactly as it should. Ruri watches him silently, thinking that he is an unpredictable and rather unsettling psychopath. Even so, she suggests they leave the foul-smelling place before the stench of death clings to them. It would not be fitting for a gentleman to smell like blood just before his own engagement ceremony. The story moves to the day of the engagement ceremony at Archduchess Valda's castle. Before everything begins, Ruri asks Ferda if he has finished writing his engagement vows. Ferda says he has and explains that the Archduchess wanted both of them to write their own vows for the moon ceremony. It turns out she has a surprisingly romantic side. Ruri isn't impressed. To her, that's just a nicer way of looking at the situation. She can't stand the idea that someone as powerful as her teacher is holding such an important ceremony in a place she considers even worse than a stable. In her eyes, it doesn't suit the Archduchess's status at all. Ferda notices the concern on Ruri's face. Even if she isn't excited about the engagement, he can tell she genuinely wants Valdadrova to be happy. Watching her struggle with those mixed emotions makes him feel a little sorry for her. Ruri catches the look on his face almost immediately and gets irritated. She tells him not to wrinkle the formal outfit she spent so much time preparing. Ferda quietly accepts her irritation. If venting her emotions at him helps, he's willing to let it happen. As they continue talking, Ferda mentions that things have stayed quiet since the previous meeting. He then asks about the current state of the Archduchy, pointing out that none of the feudal lords seem capable of properly managing the front lines. Ruri agrees. She explains that things worked well when the lords were allowed to govern on their own, but without anyone keeping them in check, they've become obsessed with enriching themselves. They're even using military force to silence the citizens' complaints, making a large-scale rebellion seem almost unavoidable. Hearing that, Ferda realizes the situation is much worse than he expected. He believes everything could be resolved immediately if the Archduchess stepped in herself. A single order from her would be enough to make everyone beg for forgiveness. As Ruri walks away, she tells him he'll soon understand why the Archduchess refuses to get involved. A short while later, Ferda is told to take his seat and wait as the engagement ceremony officially begins. The moment the ceremony starts, an overwhelming pressure pours through the entrance. It feels as if the air itself is crushing his entire body. For a brief moment, Ferda wonders if someone like him is truly worthy of standing before Valda. Then Valda appears in her majestic dragon form and extends her hands. Ruri formally begins the moon ceremony, declaring that the ritual will unite mortality and immortality into one, creating a golden bond that neither the heavens nor the passage of time can ever break. She proclaims that the mortal will overcome the unknown and cast aside all fear. With the ritual underway, Ruri hands Ferda the ceremonial liquor. Ferda takes a sip of the ceremonial drink and immediately realizes it isn't ordinary liquor. As the drink takes effect, the overwhelming pressure from the dragon slowly begins to fade. Ruri continues the ritual, declaring that the immortal will become complete by overcoming the endless emptiness of eternal life. Now it's Valdadrova's turn to drink, but the moment she reaches for the cup, her hand starts shaking uncontrollably. She can't steady herself, ends up spilling the drink, and insists that the entire ceremony be restarted. So the ritual begins again. As Ruri repeats the ceremonial words, Ferda drinks another cup of the liquor. Before long, he's completely baffled by how many times they've already repeated the same process. He's never had alcohol before in his life, yet he's already had far more than he ever expected. He starts wondering if this is becoming a serious problem. Meanwhile, Valdadrova gets so nervous once again that she drops the ceremonial drink for a second time. That finally pushes Ruri over the edge. She excuses herself for a moment, walks over to Valdadrova, and gives her a firm lecture. Ruri reminds her that marrying a mortal was her own choice. She says everyone has worked hard to make this ceremony happen, yet her mistress keeps hiding while her fiancé is standing right in front of her. She warns that this will leave a terrible impression on him. Ruri tells Valdadrova to face her fiancé with confidence, and warns that if she spills the engagement liquor one more time, she won't overlook it. After finishing her lecture, Ruri returns to the ceremony. By now, Ferda is already exhausted from listening to the intense argument. Ruri asks if he heard everything. Ferda admits the shouting was so powerful that it felt no different from a dragon's breath. Letting out a tired sigh, Ruri says she had no choice if she wanted the ceremony to continue. She finally reveals the truth behind Valdadrova's behavior. According to Ruri, Valdadrova is actually afraid of interacting with humans. Because of that, she rarely leaves her den except when hunting monsters. Ferda is stunned to discover that someone as powerful as Valdadrova has such an unexpected weakness. He starts wondering how the engagement ceremony can possibly continue like this. A few moments later, Valdadrova finally steps outside in her human form. However, she's completely covered in heavy armor, leaving almost nothing visible. Seeing her, Ferda notices that even her face is hidden behind an enormous helmet. He had always heard that dragons become incredibly beautiful when they take human form. Instead, she looks more like a warrior heading straight into battle. Even so, Ruri resumes the ceremony. She repeats the ritual, declaring that the mortal will overcome the unknown and cast aside fear, while the immortal will overcome the emptiness of endless existence. Ruri pours the ceremonial liquor once again. This time, Valdadrova successfully drinks it. As she lifts the cup, a small part of her face is revealed. Her breathtaking beauty and graceful appearance leave Ferda completely speechless. He begins wondering if he drank too much of the ceremonial liquor because every trace of his instinctive fear has vanished. At that moment, he realizes everything before him had been prepared for an ordinary human like himself. With the ritual complete, Ruri announces that it's time for both of them to read the vows they wrote for each other. Ferda takes out his letter. After returning to the past, he realizes the vows he originally prepared no longer carry the same meaning. Even so, he speaks honestly from the heart. He tells Valdadrova that although she barely knows him, he already knows everything about her. He reveals that she once gave him her heart, and through that heart, he came to understand her completely. He witnessed her being betrayed and falsely blamed over and over again. Despite everything she endured, She continued carrying out her responsibilities with dignity. She even accepted those who hated her without reason and never abandoned the people she truly wanted to protect. Ferda admits that her unwavering kindness was what led him back to the right path. Because of that, he promises to offer his own heart to her, just as she once offered hers to him. He declares that she is his sovereign and his everything. Finally, he adds one sincere confession that wasn't written in his vows. He tells her it is an absolute honor to be engaged to such a beautiful woman. After hearing every word, Valdodrova remains silent. Ruri then asks the future bride to read her vows. Instead of answering, Valdodrova quietly turns around and walks back inside. With no other option, Ruri officially announces that the engagement ceremony has ended and asks Ferda to leave. After Ferda departs, Ruri immediately goes to check on Valdodrova. Valdodrova apologizes and quietly asks if she can stay inside her room for the next 3 days. At first, Ruri completely misunderstands the situation. She praises her teacher, believing Valdodrova had intentionally left Ferda emotionally overwhelmed. Ruri admires what she believes is the refined elegance of a dragon and assumes everything had been planned from the beginning. She even admits that she herself had been fooled and believes Valdodrova now has complete control of the situation. But after thinking it over, Ruri suddenly realizes none of it had been intentional. She understands that Valdodrova had genuinely been looking forward to the engagement ceremony. Sometime later, Ruri quietly asked her master the question that had been bothering her ever since the engagement ceremony. She wanted to know why Valda never read her vows. Valda lowered her head in embarrassment before admitting the truth. She had gotten way too nervous. She had wanted to read every single word she had written, but when the moment finally came, she just couldn't do it. She covered her face and confessed that she couldn't even bring herself to look Ferda in the eyes while saying those vows. As she remembered him, a faint blush spread across her face. She couldn't stop thinking about how pleasant that moment had been. Those piercing eyes that felt like they could see straight through her. That gentle voice, the instant she looked at him, her mind completely shut down. To her, Ferda had looked exactly like the Prince Charming she had always dreamed of. Meanwhile, Ruri looked like her soul had just left her body. She stared at her master in complete disbelief. "Master, what the fuck are you even saying? My mind has gone completely blank after hearing all this." Letting out a deep sigh, she slowly closed her eyes before speaking again. "Master, I apologize for saying this on such a joyful day, but at a time like this, you need to prepare yourself for disappointment." Valda tilted her head in confusion. "Prepare myself for disappointment? What do you mean?" Ruri explained that Ferda was now officially her fiancé. Soon he would govern the Eastern Territory in her place and hold real authority. And humans, they changed once they gained power. According to Ruri, greed always found its way into their hearts. She warned that Ferda could easily become just like that bastard, the third Imperial Prince. Valda didn't interrupt her. She simply listened in silence. Ruri lowered her head. "Master, please forgive me for bringing back memories from decades ago, but this is the best advice I can give you." Valda gave a small nod. "No, I understand you're concerned." She quietly admitted that mortals were destined to disappear one day. Maybe. It would be better if she buried these strange feelings before they grew any stronger. A little later that night, the moonlight poured through the window as Ferda stood quietly inside his room. The engagement ceremony was finally over. He had actually become engaged to the great Valda. The thought still didn't feel real. He collapsed onto his bed and let out a long breath. "I feel so strange." Looking down at his own hands, he reflected on his previous life. Back then, hatred and anger had consumed every part of him. Those emotions had left no room for anything else. He never even had the chance to experience different feelings. Then his mind drifted back to the moment he saw Valda's true human appearance. That breathtaking beauty had completely mesmerized him. But this time, everything feels different. Ever since that moment, I can't stop reliving it. My red circle has gone completely berserk. Confused, Ferda wondered what this unfamiliar feeling actually was. Then he remembered something from his previous life. A circle that ran out of control could destroy its caster. But if someone managed to control it, it could become the greatest opportunity to grow stronger. And since he had already reached the summit once before, climbing back to that level wouldn't be difficult. A mage needed two things to build a higher circle: mental fortitude and mana. Right now, the mana available to his shattered circle was nowhere near enough. But his mental strength, the will that had once reached the level of an archmage, was more than sufficient. Without wasting a single drop of mana, he began spinning every strand with absolute precision, carefully layering them together to forge his second circle. Ferda slowly closed his eyes and brought his hands together. Spellblower, second circle. With this, I'll take another step closer to her. As time passed, morning finally arrived. Ruri looked at Ferda with complete disbelief. "So you're telling me you reached the second circle in only 3 days? What a bullshit. That's an absolutely insane growth rate. I was wondering why your room stayed locked this whole time." Standing behind her, Ferda calmly listened to everything she had to say. Ruri frowned in confusion. "Do red circle mages normally grow this fast?" Ferda shook his head. "No. It depends on the individual. there is a side effect to a red circle's growth. Every time you form a new circle, you need an even stronger emotional stimulus. And the stronger that emotion becomes, the deeper the circle engraves itself into its owner. He paused for a moment before recalling his previous life. When I awakened my circle through hatred, even after I got my revenge, I kept searching for more things to hate. A short while later, Ferda's eyes suddenly widened in shock. The room in front of him looked nothing like he had expected. It was an elegant office filled with expensive furniture and official documents. Rory proudly introduced it. This is Lady Valda's office. From today onward, this will also be your workplace, Sir Ferda. You'll be serving as the Grand Duke's regent. Even though this is a dragon fortress, you'll find traces of Her Grace's consideration everywhere. But honestly, I never imagined she'd prepare all of this. For a human. Without wasting another second, Ferda walked over and sat in Valda's chair. Well then, my first duty as the Grand Duke's regent begins now. He immediately reviewed the current state of Valda's territory. The Archduchy had been neglected for far too long. But ever since he exposed Hell's crimes and displayed his severed head, the feudal lords had started walking on eggshells around him. That alone had already made his work much easier. The first thing I need to do is send the letter to the lords I met last time. Ruri nodded. This will be your first official message after taking office. What exactly are you planning to write? Ferda answered without hesitation. I'll inform them that, from this point onward, we'll be working together. As regent, I'll be personally handling the Archduchy's internal affairs. A little later, official letters were delivered to every noble under Valda's rule. Instead of a friendly greeting, the letters sounded more like a warning. If you object to this decision, then don't bother replying. Because I respect every one of you. The nobles immediately broke into a cold sweat after reading those words. At the bottom of every letter, the signature read, Sir Ferda, that settles the nobles. Now, it's time to deal with the monsters. Ferda explained that countless monsters polluted farmland simply by existing. They claimed countless innocent lives every single year. While Valda was busy holding back disaster-class monsters, even she had limits. She couldn't personally eliminate every lesser monster across the territory. So before anything else, I need to recruit capable people. Ruri blinked in confusion. You already have someone in mind? Without saying a word, Ferda handed her a list. Ruri slowly read every name written on it. Sometime later, the two of them left the castle together. As they traveled, Ruri couldn't hide her confusion. So you're saying we're personally searching for our very first recruit? And he's some unknown scholar? Before long, a breathtaking city came into view. This was the City of Scholars, Ilzia, the place where countless brilliant minds gathered. Ferda had come here for one specific reason, to recruit talent. Ruri looked around in confusion. It makes sense that I don't know him. If he really is that talented, why hasn't anyone heard about him yet? She folded her arms. It'll become a huge problem if you just drag some random person back to run the government. Then she glanced back at the list in her hands. Wait, did you seriously scribble all these names down on the spot? Ferda smiled. I wouldn't do something like that. It may not look impressive, but gathering this information took me a very long time. Deep inside, however, he remembered the truth. Long ago, this had been his very first hit list. Back when hatred had completely consumed him, he had carefully researched every achievement these people made. Not to admire them, but to find flaws he could exploit when the time came for revenge. Looking back now, it all felt completely pathetic. As Ferda scanned the crowded streets, he frowned. This is a problem. How am I supposed to find him in a city this big? The two of them eventually stopped near a large statue. Just then, a nearby street vendor suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, Hey, noble gentlemen, and you adorable young ladies. How about something sweet to cure those headaches? It's the academy student's favorite snack. Ferda immediately walked over to the vendor. I have a question. Do a lot of academy graduates come by your stand? The vendor nodded with a smile. Of course, sir. It may not look like much, but I've been selling here for a very long time. In that case, Ferda leaned a little closer. You must know someone they call the messy scholar. The moment those words left his mouth, Ruri whipped her head toward him with an irritated expression. What did you just say? Messy? Are you seriously planning to turn our castle into a filthy mess or something? Seeing Ruri yelling like that, the street vendor couldn't stop laughing. He grinned and shrugged. That nickname really is pretty famous. As he skillfully prepared a batch of sweet treats, he continued. But I'm busy running my shop all day. It's hard to remember every face, so I can't quite recall the details. Ferda looked at him. Then how much is it going to cost? The vendor answered without hesitation. 5 copper coins for 3 strawberry skewers. Before Ferda could respond, Ruri immediately stepped in. One would have been more than enough. We'll take all 3. Ferda blinked in confusion. What? Sweet candy? The shop owner happily handed them over. Here are your honey-glazed fruits. The glossy strawberry candies looked absolutely delicious. The moment Ruri took them, her eyes lit up like a little kid who had just received the greatest treasure in the world. Watching her excitement, Ferda couldn't help smiling. Wow, that's actually surprising. I never expected you to like things like this. Ruri's face instantly turned red. Hey, you, just shut up. I only bought them for the information. But as Ferda watched her happily munch on the candy, he quietly thought to himself, I assumed she was someone whose emotions had dried up, just like mine. But she can still make expressions this childish. Ruri kept eating with a huge smile on her face. Then she suddenly noticed Ferda looking at her candy. Her expression changed immediately. Like a little kid protecting her favorite snack, she quickly hid the candy behind her back. She genuinely looked like she thought Ferda was about to steal it. Ferda just stared at her. What the hell? Noticing his reaction, Ruri glared at him. Hey, bastard. You want one? Ferda shook his head. No. You can eat all of them. I'm not interested. After a brief pause, Ferda glanced at the sky. We should get moving. It'll be night soon. The scene then shifted somewhere else. Inside a dimly lit room, a single candle flickered against the darkness. A young man sat alone in a miserable-looking room. Loose papers and research notes flew everywhere as the wind swept through the open window. The exhausted scholar watched his hard work scatter across the room before letting out a bitter sigh. I guess all of my research is getting blown away anyway. The frustration in his voice made it clear he was already at his breaking point. Then, the story shifts to the past of the very scholar Ferda came to recruit. He had once been known as the Academy's greatest freshman and its worst graduate. We watched the 525th Academy graduation title ceremony come to an end as the young scholar, Bernil Marquez, quietly leaves the venue. But before he can get very far, two thugs suddenly block his path. The moment they grab him from behind, one of them smirks. Hey, we're practically old friends. Of course I had to come congratulate you. The blonde thug standing beside him bursts into laughter. Seriously, what the hell did you do to earn a nickname like Messy Scholar? Anyway, congratulations on graduating. Bernil immediately realizes why they're really here. They haven't come to celebrate. They've come to collect the debt he owes. Several large men stand behind the two bullies, silently surrounding him while making sure he has nowhere to run. The blonde thug casually throws an arm over Bernil's shoulder, laughing loudly as if he were greeting an old friend. Meanwhile, Bernil is visibly terrified. Without warning, the men begin beating him. The blonde thug grabs him by the collar and sneers. So, you still need more time? Bernil desperately pleads. Just give me a little longer. I promise I'll pay every single coin back. The thug's expression instantly darkens. I already waited years for you to graduate, and now you actually have the nerve to ask for even more time? He pinches his nose in disgust before glancing at the creature lying nearby. Seriously, what the hell is this disgusting animal supposed to be? Bernil quickly shakes his head. It's not an animal, it's a monster. My research focuses on converting worthless monster corpses into mana stones and energy resources. The materials are difficult to obtain, but if I succeed, it'll become a revolutionary breakthrough for the entire continent. The thug rolls his eyes. Spare me the excuses. He places a cigar between his lips, folds his arms, and stares down at Bernil. I waited because you kept saying you were working on some groundbreaking research, but tell me, is any of that going to make money right now? Bernil lowers his head. Right now, probably not. There are still too many variables. The thug lets out a mocking laugh. You're exactly what I'd expect from a researcher who knows absolutely nothing about the real world. Forget this pointless research, and I'll give you a chance to pay off your debt. Bernil's eyes widen. Excuse me? The thug chuckles before pulling out a knife and casually spinning it in his hand. Weapons research pays well anywhere. Put that brilliant brain of yours to work making something people will actually buy. Weren't you the top freshman in your class? Start acting like it. Bernil's entire body trembles as sweat runs down his face. Clutching his debt papers, he stammers, Weapons? I actually have another research proposal. Before he can finish speaking, that bastard suddenly threw the knife and it landed just inches away from Bernil's chicken. Now listen, if that knife had gone just a tiny bit further, you guys already know his entire future would have gone straight into darkness. His future kids would have ended up growing without a father. I mean, the poor guy would have never even become a father in the first place. The blonde bastard smirked. I tried being nice, but you just keep pushing your luck. Meanwhile, Bernil was still shaking because that knife had landed way too close to his chicken. The blonde bastard looked down at him and sneered. Are you really in any position to be this picky? Then Bernil trembled uncontrollably before pleading, but I absolutely can't develop weapons. He practically shouted, Please, just let me work on something else. The blonde loan shark didn't care. He kicked Bernil straight in the face before sneering. Talking to you is a waste of time. You reject this, you reject that. Then you can just die. The two burly bodyguards immediately joined in, mercilessly beating Bernil while their leader watched with complete indifference. We loan sharks can't afford to lose a single coin. Bernil curled up on the ground, desperately trying to shield himself. Please, spare me. At this rate, I'm really going to die. Just then, a calm voice interrupted everything. That's enough. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Ferda and Ruri had arrived. Ferda calmly looked around the room. I heard the commotion from outside. Looks like I came to the right place. He then looked directly at the blonde loan shark. I have business with that man as well. The loan shark took a drag from his cigarette before looking Ferda up and down. Judging by your clothes, you look like some rich kid from out of town. Don't tell me this bastard borrowed money from you too. Ferda simply shook his head. No, then wait your turn. I'll beat him just enough so he can still talk. Ferda looked at Bernil. That's going to be a problem. I don't need his mouth. I need his brain. So how about I pay off his debt instead? The loan shark raised an eyebrow. Including the interest, that's 72 gold coins. Do you even have that kind of money? Without saying a word, Ruri dropped a heavy bag of gold onto the table. Of course, the loan shark's eyes widened. So you actually had someone this wealthy backing you. Bernal, you really are one lucky bastard. He reached for the gold. Before he could touch it, Ruri grabbed his wrist. Ferda calmly stopped him. The deal isn't finished yet. I told you I wanted his brain. After your beating, I doubt it'll work properly anymore. If you damage the merchandise, shouldn't you pay compensation? The loan shark desperately tried to pull his hand free, but Ruri's grip didn't move even an inch. What kind of insane logic is this? He's a person. Damn it, bitch. Let go. How the fuck does a girl have this much strength? Those words instantly pissed Ruri off. She tightened her grip even more. The man screamed in agony as several bones in his hand cracked under the pressure. Ferda looked at her. I'm counting on you. Ruri calmly wiped her hands with a handkerchief before looking at the loan shark. Looks like I don't even need to step in. The next moment, her eyes began glowing with a bright green light as an overwhelming aura erupted from her body. The crushing pressure instantly forced the loan shark and every one of his bodyguards onto their knees. The loan shark could barely breathe. My body won't move. What the fuck is this? Is this even magic? If it isn't, then what the hell is this crushing pressure? Ferda slowly walked toward them. You have two choices. Either compensate Bernal for beating him, or take the exact same beating you gave him. He smiled. And since loan sharks can't afford to lose a single coin, I'm sure you'll choose the second option without hesitation. Ruri slowly cracked her knuckles while staring directly at the loan shark. Then let's settle your debt with a proper beating. After that, all that could be heard were the loan shark's miserable screams echoing throughout the broken-down house. You could already imagine how beautifully Ruri was beating the living shit out of him inside. A short while later, Ruri casually wiped her hands clean again because beating those bastards had made them dirty. Meanwhile, Ferda watched as the loan shark and his bodyguards crawled away in complete humiliation. Bernil looked at Ferda with gratitude. Thank you for saving me. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Then, the scholar finally introduced himself. My name is Bernal Marquez, the messy scholar. Ferda nodded before introducing himself as well. I'm Ferda Wildrova. The moment Bernil heard that surname, his eyes widened in shock. Excuse me, Wildrova? The next second, he immediately bowed all the way to the ground. Please forgive me for failing to recognize the Grand Duke's husband. Ferda simply smiled. It makes sense that you didn't know, so don't worry about it. I actually came here because I read your research. Bernal froze. You're interested in my research? Ferda raised his hand. Yes, I heard you're researching ways to make use of monster corpses. The Far East is overflowing with monsters, so if you come to Castle Wildrova, I'll support your research without any conditions. The moment Bernil heard those words, his eyes completely lit up. It was like someone had just handed him the biggest dream of his entire life. He looked happier than ever. Ferda continued, I'll provide every material, every fund, and every facility you'll ever need. Hearing all of that only made Bernal even more excited. Meanwhile, Ruri couldn't help staring at Ferda. Is he actually insane? Then Ferda calmly added, in return, you'll use your research to develop weapons. The moment Bernil heard the word weapon, every bit of excitement instantly disappeared. Just hearing that condition felt like he'd been hit by a freaking 440-volt electric shock. It looked like his soul had literally left his body. Inside his head, he could only think, what the fuck, weapons? He immediately shook his head. If that's the condition, then I can't accept it. Weapons take people's lives and destroy peace. I want this land to remain peaceful. Ferda looked at him with a serious expression. I see, so you value peace. Then let me ask you something. Do you know how many people a single monster kills in the Far East? Bernal immediately fell silent. Ferda continued. Once every 3 days, Grand Duke Valda marches to the front lines where colossal monsters gather. There are monsters capable of wiping out an entire city like Ilcia in a single moment. And every single time, Valda risks her life fighting those monsters. He lowered his voice. Meanwhile, the people who know nothing about that reality simply enjoy the peace created by her sacrifices, as if nothing is wrong. Ferda looked directly into Bernal's eyes. That's exactly why I need someone who can create weapons capable of bringing those monsters down. Only then can I finally lighten her burden. That's why I came looking for you, the man everyone ignored. As he spoke, Ferda pulled out a document and held it in front of Bernil. I'd like to appoint you as our chief researcher. Bernil stared at the paper in disbelief. Is this an appointment letter? Even so, he still hesitated. But forging weapons with my own hands, Ferda already knew how Bernil's future would unfold. One day he would become a legendary magical engineer, a man who would willingly wage war to protect peace.